But leadership is a funny word. It's like we always say a leader is someone who takes people or an organization or themselves from somewhere to somewhere. And if a journey is not involved, the leader is not required. And that's why we tend to talk more about leaders these days, the managers or stuff. The environment we find ourselves is shifting so much. So whether you actually lead people or you're just leading your peers, leading your family, leadership is a broad statement that applies to anybody, anytime you're trying to move people or an organization from somewhere to somewhere.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, super excited to be here, James.
Yeah, thank you so much. Right, we're going to dive straight in, Andrew, with the first question, which is always, Andrew, what's important to you?
Well, many things, as you can well imagine, but in the context of the work that I do, it's helping leaders really create the life that they were intended to live. It's helping people really live life rather than just sort of, I guess Earl Nightingale's quote was one of my favorite quotes. He said, "The problem with most people is that they sleepwalk through life hoping to make it safely to death." We're only put here for a short time, and I think we should live our lives and we should live them fully. And the problem is most people go to work and they're so exhausted by the end of the day that they arrive home and they collapse onto the couch and they're like, I just got to recharge my battery so I can go back and slog it out another day. And I just don't think that was what we were designed to do. I think we're designed for much more.
Yeah, 100%. And it's obviously one of the interesting parts of that. I totally agree with everything you're saying there, but you're very much focused on the leadership element of that sort of part of it. So tell me why that, because you led with that word in sense of letting it the leadership, where does that come into play?
Yeah, and we primarily within the Oxley Group, we mostly work with leaders in a corporate, usually entrepreneurial organizations. But leadership is a funny word. It's like we always say a leader is someone who takes people or an organization or themselves from somewhere to somewhere. And if a journey is not involved, the leader is not required. And that's why we tend to talk more about leaders these days, the managers or stuff, because the environment we find ourselves is shifting so much. So whether you actually lead people or you're just leading your peers, leading your family, leadership is a broad statement that applies to anybody, anytime you're trying to move people or an organization from somewhere to somewhere.
Absolutely. And what would you then, because it is very much, I think, a change in that sort of, in the world of work, from the manager to the leader, in a sense of what we might have considered the old traditional manager, do what I say type thing. What do you think in your sort of time in your career? How have you seen that shift? What do you think has been the biggest shifts in that?
Yeah, I was actually having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were asking me if leadership had changed. And I'm like, well, people are still people. So
Yes.
Leadership in its essence and its principles hasn't really changed. The urgency and the necessity to lead properly has changed. And I would say right around, COVID, we actually microwaved about 10 years of change into about 3 months. And, initially it was interesting. I was working with different CEOs and they were super excited when, everyone went home because they said, we're so productive now. It's so much done and we're not having to spend all this wasted time in meetings and talking around the water cooler. And then about 3 months later, they called me back and they're like, hey, it's not working so well anymore. And what had happened was, of course, when you send people away, all that interaction you have at work is what creates the grease and the lubrication for the organizations that we interact with to be productive. And when you expend all that, when it's all gone, then all we have is like the hard driving tasks, right? So what's happened after COVID is we have a whole generation of people who are like, you know what? I'd like to sort of know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'd like to know where we're headed, and I'd like to know the purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And so you had the Great Resignation, and just it befuddled a lot of older leaders because they're like, why? What is wrong with these people? And they termed it, it was all young people. And yet I personally see this as not just about young people. I see this cascading up through the generations where human beings are asking the right question, like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? And is it just to chase a number? Because that doesn't seem very fulfilling to me. So that I think leadership in so much, James, has not necessarily changed, but the urgency of leading people properly,
Mm.
it is absolutely tenfold since COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think I'd agree with you in the sense of that period in COVID. I love the way you said it, microwave 10 years into 3 months. That's a great little phrase because it really did accelerate so much in
Really
relation
did.
to workplace around the world, I think. But it gave, as you say, so many people moments of pause and moments of
Yes.
consideration where they maybe, as you said before, that sort of going in and out, that conveyor belt of going in and out of work and just being tired to then go back in, recharge to go the next day, where it gave people, and I think that, as you said, that the purpose, what's the point? Why am I doing what I'm doing versus, and looking for that fulfillment around it. Have you since then, since sort of COVID then, had, and the companies that you work with, have you seen a change in them saying, trying to bring purpose much more to the forefront when they're sort of with employees?
Yeah, yeah, because all the statistics show that the young people today will work harder for a purpose and a mission than a paycheck. Um, so now here's the thing, like in general, like we've worked historically with some very large firms across the country and across the world. Um, However, I will say this: in general, scale brings tremendous advantages, right, over entrepreneurial type businesses, except in the area of purpose, because
Mm,
it's much easier to connect to smaller organization. And when we say small, could be 1,000 people, but still small in relation to the monster companies that dominate the corporate landscape. It's much easier for an entrepreneur or a leader within a small organization to imbue a sense of purpose into an organization than with a really large, sometimes soulless corporation.
yeah,
So there's,
absolutely.
whereas scale brings tremendous benefits in this area, this is the one area that entrepreneurial organizations have a massive benefit. And young people, are attracted to this. They want to be part of it. But it's not just young people. I think
Mm.
everybody wants to be part of something that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people looking for that element of fulfillment, as is one of the words you used there as well. And um, is it? I'm wondering. The next question: when you're dealing with and you're working with, is it mainly corporations that you work with or companies? That's the first question.
Yeah, normally it's entrepreneur. Well, our focus right now,
Yeah.
because we historically work with larger companies, and we made a switch about 5 years ago. And it's not like if a big company calls me and asks me to do something, I don't necessarily say no, but we do not pursue any work with a non-entrepreneurial organization.
Okay.
So we work
Interesting.
with organizations, we work with entrepreneurial companies. It's just so much more fun.
Yeah.
So sometimes those are small companies. Like we have clients that have 5 to 10 employees, but
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes they're larger companies, but they're still run by the founder
Yes.
and the entrepreneur. And there's just a different energy around those types of organizations.
Yeah, for sure. And is there a particular sector of people, or is it just the fact that they were just an entrepreneur and getting into a new business?
Yeah, it's not sector specific. I mean, if you look
Okay.
at, I mean, we've worked with entertainment companies, insurance companies, manufacturers, distributors. We've worked with every type of company. I always say they have one thing in common, and that's people. Um,
Yes.
every business has three problems: people, process, and product, right? And so we work in the people area, which is the most complex area
Yeah.
to work in. People, product and process are actually pretty simple. Actually, I believe.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
People, now they're complicated.
Yeah. So when you're sort of brought in, and I'm really interested now when you're, say, working with this, I say, a new company or a new sort of client, and you go and try and work with the people. Is there a standard way you work with the process, or is it kind of see under the hood first and then try and apply what you know?
Yeah, well, we work in three specific ways. Either we have a public leadership development process we use, and it is a process. It's not an event. I mean, I don't know about you. I've been to leadership development events where it's like a day or 3 days, and you're super
Yeah.
charged up, and you get a binder, and you come back and you put the binder down, but you're really busy because you've been away. So you you put that over there, and then about 3 months later, you're like, crap, I really meant to do something with that. Um,
Yep.
so we decided a long time ago that when we do leadership work with organizations, we're going to do it as a process where it's very low touch for a short period of time, or high touch for a short period of time, like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then we go away for 2 weeks, and then we come back, and we do that all virtually with our clients. So that's one way. We do strategic planning type work, and we do one-on-one coaching with clients as well. So it doesn't have to be a massive organization or an
Sure.
organization at all. There are entrepreneurs that just hire us because they're like, I need help in this particular area.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
we do coach people one-on-one as well. Yeah,
Very
but
good.
it's. I mean, the models are all established. The principles are all established. So whether it's whatever form it takes in terms of process, it's the same type of.
Yeah, for sure. And is it then is it the length of time you work with them? Is it dependent on the result they're trying to get? Is it an outcome, or is it sort of, where's the sort of, is the, or is there a continual relationship with anyone you work with?
Well, it can be like I had one CEO I coached for 7 years. Um, in fact, I'm still coaching him, but the company has grown. I don't even know what the percentage was, but they started out at 250 million. They're now approaching 2 billion. So it's not the same company, right? So it's
Yes.
a very different company. So typically
Yes.
my job is to work myself out of a job where
Yeah.
I'm no longer necessary. But if a lot of times with entrepreneurial organizations and individuals, they're growing so fast that they're getting new challenges all the time. I like
Mm.
to say to people, it's not having problems that exhausts us, it's having the same problems day after day after day after
Yeah.
day. New problems are actually, I mean, they can be tiring, but at least there's the sense that I'm doing something new and I'm learning new things, right? Where if it's the same problem, it's like, man, it's the same stuff day after day after day, and it's just
Yeah.
drudgery.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a very interesting, it's a very distinct perspective. You say, what's the, is it Einstein doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result type thing, isn't it? You know, versus say, but also the interesting thing to say when you say, when you work with that particular CEO for 7 years and the length and the change in that company, it's as you say though, the challenges or the problems that come up are going to be different because that person's going to be different. Not only just the company's going to be different, their own circumstances, their own development is going to be different. So it's you're not you in theory should be coaching them on different things because everything is going to be different from the first time you met them.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because we'll do the same program sometimes, and we'll do it from the CEO level all the way down to the frontline leader. And
Yes.
sometimes I'll have a frontline leader who's like, I'm not getting much out of this. It's not really, doing it's simple stuff. And I'm like, how is that possible? How could I have a guy who runs a $2 billion company who's getting something out of it, but a frontline leader isn't? And I think it's because sometimes we're looking for the magic bullet. We're looking for the thing that, like this complex thing that says, that's the thing I need to do differently. And what I find, success in life is not about doing complex things. It's about doing really simple things consistently. But that's not what we want to hear. I don't want to do the same stuff over and over. I want to do something new and exciting. Really, if you go interview people who've been super successful, they'll tell you, no, it's sort of about getting really good at some very, very basic things.
Absolutely. And I think I'd echo that in that the complexity thing. I think when I've worked with people before as well, is that there's a kind of like bit of a barrier people put up in some ways because they think they have this belief inside themselves going, oh, well, the problem I have is so complicated.
Yes.
It must require the most ridiculously complicated solution. When really it's kind of like, no, you're just like the rest of us. You're just a bit scared. So it's how do we kind of peel that back? Because it's a way of trying to keep us away almost, or keep themselves from maybe looking in the mirror a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. my initial career, I got a
Yeah.
degree in mechanical engineering, and which has nothing to do with what I do today.
Yeah.
I it was funny because it did set me up to sort of analyze problems,
Mm.
and and it's interesting because a lot of times I'll be talking to a client and um, they'll uh, they'll be explaining something to me, and it's so complicated. I don't know what to do, and I'll ask some questions, and we'll talk for a little while, and they'll go, that was really helpful. Thank you. And I'm like, I did nothing. All I did was sort of talk and ask questions and got them to think about the problem site sort of differently because I didn't understand the problem. I mean, that's sometimes
Yes.
what clients will say to me. They're like, well, what do you know about, like, whatever? And I'm like, luckily not much. And they're
Yes.
like, well, why shouldn't you know something about our industry? I'm like, nah, not really, because people are people. And if I
Yes.
knew enough about your industry, I'd be bought into all the things that you think aren't possible. But
Yes.
by not knowing, I can ask all the dumb questions that maybe somebody else is unwilling or doesn't even think to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually, it was going to be my next question in sense of, so you going back, you studied sort of mechanical engineering. I'm always interested in people's careers. How did you find yourself in what you do now?
Well, funny story. I actually was in my final year of mechanical engineering, and everybody at the college I went to had to take a honors level business class, and so I wasn't exactly at the top of my engineering class. I have to admit that, but I did very well in this particular class. And so the professor, at the end of one of the classes, he said, "Mr. Oxley, will you stay after class?" And I was like, "Sure," which was never a good sign for me.
Yeah.
So I went up to talk to him, and he said, "Hey, I've been reviewing your transcript." I'm like, "Oh gosh." And he's like, "You're not exactly at the top of your engineering class." And I'm like, "I am aware of this." He says, "You're at the top of this class, though." And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "It occurs to me you should not work as an engineer after you graduate." And I was like, "Well, that's a bit of a shame. I'm in fourth year. I've been doing this for a
Yeah.
long time." He said, "Go sell something technical." And I said, "Is that a thing?" And he said, "Yeah. Yeah, go get a technical sales job." So that's what I did. I went and sold commercial air conditioning for Trane Air Conditioning in Toronto, Canada. Had a great uh, short career there. Toronto was going through a building boom at the time, which enabled me to have what I affectionately refer to as my midlife crisis early. Um, and so, I decided to shift, streams, and I decided to immigrate to the U.S., to the Atlanta area, and start a new business in an area I knew nothing about, trying to solve a problem that I had not quite figured out for myself yet, which was how to live a more uh, full life.
Yeah.
Um, but I got the benefit of studying it full time once I started a business trying to help other people do it. Uh,
Okay.
so after
And
30 some years, I figured out a few things. I still
yeah, for sure.
don't know a lot of things, but
Yeah. So you went into the sort of this effective industry 30 years ago, trying to and iterate to where you got to now.
correct. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a slow learner. It took me a long time.
But I think it's because it's really interesting because a lot of you people would think it's a new industry. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's because of it now in a sense of the way media is now, in a sense of coaching, that general thing of well-being or how to solve that problem from, I suppose it was consultancy would have made maybe the previous name and things like that.
Yeah.
But this is the interesting thing for me. It's like it's an industry, especially I suppose more so in North America, been there for a long time and established. So in those 30 years, though, you must have seen a lot of change and transition.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I initially started doing training, but it was facilitated training. Even
Mm,
back then, it wasn't a trainer in a box where you popped up and talked to as many people as possible. It was facilitated learning, and did that for a long time, and then slowly went from a broad training base directly into leadership. And it's we always hear, and this might be important to your audience to hear, even though I heard it and didn't do it for a number of years, that the key to success is specialization. And we know this. We see this with doctors. We see this with handyman, versus somebody who's specifically focused on something. But I was in the general training field, soft skills training, and I kept thinking I really need to specialize. But then requests would come in, and I'd be like, I can't turn that away. So I really wasn't until about probably 15 years ago I really started to focus exclusively on leadership. And then I started focusing exclusively on, entrepreneurial leadership, and then a particular type of company. And every time I focused, the business has expanded, and which is counterintuitive, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so my art was training, facilitation, sort of consultative towards coaching. And over COVID, I figured out something really cool. I don't want that to sound weird, because COVID was a horrible worldwide
Yeah,
event, of
yeah.
course. But I actually learned something through it. And that was, I had been trying to put large groups of people together to defray the cost of the leadership training, which was hard. You had to have an organization of a certain size in order to be able to do that. What I figured out during COVID, because nobody, of course, could get together, was that I had all these clients that would pay me more to train one leader than they would 10, because it was a critical leader. And
Yes.
so I was like, wow, I wouldn't have figured that out had it not have been for COVID. And so we
Yes.
moved to a very much, we have, that program is called Leadership Expert. Leadership is our flagship, which we do in cohorts. Leadership Expert is where we work one-on-one with people twice a month. We have coaching conversations, and my goal, they say, how long does it take? It depends what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
But usually 6 to 12 months we work with a client. And our goal is, if we can do it faster,
Yeah.
I'm all
Yeah.
about that, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, I love that the way you spoke to that, because it's the clarity of, you say, becoming more and more focused, and the sort of referred to as your niche or whatever, or more specific in relation to the person you work with, the problem you're trying to solve, in the sense of when you're in business. But as you say, it almost does sound counterintuitive, that the more you narrow yourself, the less you're going to get, but it actually goes the other way, because people know exactly what you're going to do for them. But
Yeah.
what I love about the example, though, is that it took the length of time that it took for you to get there. Because I think what we mistake, and if this is definitely myself in this, in a sense of trying to build up, in a sense of my own business, is like, this stuff takes time. It takes the commitment, the iterations to do stuff. And sometimes, was it the way it sounded when you were explaining that, it kind of just came up. It wasn't like you had that sort of lightning bulb, light bulb thing. Was it a sort of just osmosis or whatever, just came up for you, these changes?
Yeah, it did. And I'd like to say it was more designed. Um, there's the old expression, do you have 20 years of experience, or do you have the same year 20 times? And I can look
Yes.
back over my career, and I'm like, I repeated the same year a bunch of times there. And why was that? So I'm really working hard at not having that happen now.
Yes.
Um, but this specialization thing, here's an example I think might resonate with your audience. I had a buddy of mine, we were at a group meeting, and he said, my son's looking for a job. And he said, will you talk to him? I'm like, yes. And so I talked to him. I said, what are you looking for? And he said, really anything. And I was but like what kind of company? He's like, I just want to get a good job with a good company. Okay, no, well, it's not that that's a bad answer, but I left the conversation with, I don't know what to do with that. Like,
Yeah.
if he'd said, I want to be in the petrochemical industry and I want to do this, or I want this type of job, I would like, oh, I know a client who does that. But a
Yes.
good job and a good company, I'm like, I don't know where to go. So part of the reason why you want to specialize is because you get better, right? Definitively in working with. But the other thing is, when you specialize, you're using language that resonates with people in a particular area. And when you have general language, you have very little resonance.
Mm.
It's like people, yeah, that's good. Like nobody in general says, oh, we don't need any training. People, "Oh, we need some training," but like, unless you're able to describe it in a way that resonates with a client or coaching, it's just not, it's not going to move them into action. But when you specialize, you're using language, you're like, that word resonates with me. That person
Mm.
understands what our challenges are. And so I think, I would just say, you know, as hard as it is, and I lived it, as hard as it is, until you start saying no to things that are, outside of what you really want to do, you will, you really won't be able to focus on the people you really want to serve.
Hi, James here. If you've been watching and thinking, I would like to make a change, but not sure where to start, that's where I can help. My 12-week coaching program will enable you to reconnect with what matters most and move forward with clarity and confidence. If that sounds like you, head over to jamesdeancoach.com. Now let's get back to the episode. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, getting that. And I think I'd be interested in your perspective on this, because I think a lot of people that I've spoken to on this show as well, and people that I've worked with in a coaching capacity, kind of goes back to maybe to COVID as well. That specialism that they've had in their employment or in their work, whatever. There's a lot of complete career shifts and complete transitions, not even transitions, just taking a complete left turn and doing something completely different, because the realization in a sense of that fulfillment or purpose piece. But it doesn't, a lot of people as well, though, they've enjoyed what they've done. It's not like they've hated the career they've had so far. They just realized, I've come to the end of this, and they're taking a bit of that sort of gamble to go into it. Are you seeing that from your perspective, that there's people kind of, especially in the entrepreneurial space you're working in, they're kind of willing to take those risks?
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurs in general, they're a little insane. It is the challenge we run into, and I with people is like, if you're really good at photography, you start a photography business,
Yeah.
but you really just have a job at that point, and your boss is a lunatic, because it's you. So like, people will say to me, so, well, you could take time off. You work for yourself. I'm like, yeah, I can. But the problem is, if you're a photographer and you take time off, nothing happens while you're gone, right?
Yes.
So growing an entrepreneurial business to a place where there are things happening when you're not present is critical, right? So one of the things that people will often say to me, I had this conversation with a guy up in the Northeast of the U.S. one time. He's like, we don't get paid what we're worth. I hope not. And he's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, I said, well, there has to be some profit in employing you by the company. Otherwise, they're on their way out of business. So you really can't get paid what you're worth. He's like, we don't understand how hard we work. And I was like, that's a completely different issue. But like, when people go out on their own, the very first thing they do quite often is they sort of try to figure out, well, how much money do I have to make per hour in order to earn what I used to earn, which is the wrong question, because you're not going to work every hour. You're just not. So you have to sort of look at this and say, what's the worth? Like, if you're a handyman, for example, and you're like, if I was making $25 an hour working for this guy. If I could make 50, that'd be twice as much. Well, but you have way more expense and you're not going to work all the time. And so really the question is, what's the value of what I'm bringing to the marketplace? Because if the value I'm bringing to the marketplace for a particular task is $300 and it takes me 2 hours, why would I charge $100? Because if you do, essentially, first of all, you're not going to do very well financially. You may go out of business because you've not accounted for all the expenses that are going to be involved in being self-employed, right? So when people are thinking about going out on their own, my caution to them is to spend a little bit of time thinking about, what do people pay for the services which I am looking to go out and do, not like equate it to $1 an hour.
No, that's great insight, because obviously for yourself in business and then working with other businesses, that sounds like obviously one of the first big challenges to people. They're sort of there. How do they charge? What do they charge for their service? What other sort of, because people might find this interesting or value to them, what other sort of mistakes would you say that people make where they try and go out on their own, whether it be as an individual or starting at a company?
Yeah, well, they fall in love with what they do, first of all, right? So the photographer who starts the photography business loves photography, but they are not a business owner, right? So it's
Yes.
almost easier to start a business doing something you don't understand because you can't do it. You have to get other people to go do it for you. Now, I'm not suggesting that's the only path, but that's true. So, there was a great book written many, many years ago by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth. So if you're starting a business, I would strongly recommend reading the E-Myth. It's been rewritten many times, republished many times, but it's still just as good. It's basically about the myth that entrepreneurs believe that if they're good at something, they can operate a business doing that very same thing, and they're two very different things, right? So uh, now I think you mentioned a lot of your audience are coaches. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So specifically with respect to coaching, you must not charge per hour.
Mm.
Nobody wants your time. I figured this out a long time ago, and I'll say it to clients. They'll say, well, how do you charge? I said, I charge by the month. And they're like, well, how many times we're going to meet? Are we going to meet? I'm like, I don't know. Depends. Probably a couple of times. If we need to meet more, we'll meet more. We might not meet but once a month. And they're like, so you're just going to charge me the same? I'm like, I don't think you want my time. In fact, I
Yes.
think you'd prefer less of it. If I could give you
Yes.
less time and get you to where you're going, you'd probably prefer that, wouldn't you? If we got on the phone and we're supposed to talk for an hour, but we're done in 10 minutes, and you're like, that was incredibly powerful. I know what I need to go do. Wouldn't you prefer to get off the phone than have me hang out on the phone with you for another 50 minutes? So just nobody wants your time. They want a result. So what you have to
Yes.
figure out is, how do I get them the result? Disconnect your billing from time. So
Yes.
go to a monthly charge, and when people say, "Well, that's a lot of money," one of my first mentors was Bob Proctor, who was
Wow.
fabulous. Yeah, he was fabulous. He was not the kinder, gentler mentor, by the way. But anyway, he used to say, when people say that's a lot of money, he'd always say, compared to what?
Yeah.
Like, compared to, if it's a lot of money to compare to the value you're receiving, well, that's a problem. But if the value far exceeds the amount of you're charging someone, then it's not a lot of money. No number is either big or small until you compare it to something. And so, if you say, well, you're charging X amount of money per month, the value better far exceed that. um, and the way I sort of do the little takeaway with clients on this, I do two things. I've tried two things. I've never had anyone take me up on the second one, but I'll tell you both of them. The first thing I do is I say, we provide 100% money back guarantee. If at any time in our relationship you feel like I have misrepresented or I have not delivered the value that we agreed upon, you can ask for all your money back. And staff members, when they first come on, they're like, you can't tell people that. They'll they'll ask for their money back. And I'm like, no one has ever asked for
Ever.
their money back. Because I don't take people on that I think aren't going to be successful.
Yes.
So the second thing I've done is, and no one's ever taken me up on this. I had a client one time, and it was a large consulting project. They were merging two firms. And I said, here's what it's going to cost for me to help you with the merger over the next 12 months. And they said, that's a huge amount of money. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take 0.1% of the increased profits from the merger of the two companies. And he sat there for a minute. He said, I think I'll pay your fee.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
now he was like, well, he did the calculation in his head, and
Yeah.
he's like, well, if he's willing to bet on himself,
Yeah.
and I know that number is going to be way bigger than his fee, then if I may as well just pay the fee, right?
Yes. Yes. But the perfect example you gave earlier just a bit ago was the CEO you worked with for 7 years who started at, was it 2 million or 200 million, and he's into the billions? Do you know what I mean? So that growth just shows you because I think it's some great tips there for people obviously about getting into business and the things. I think there's so much going on in my head, but the value is the piece there. It's what you're giving, as you say, it's the result, it's the outcome, it's the value what persons are paying for. As you say, not necessarily, it's not your time. It's what you do within those interactions that they are able to then implement and get them to where they need to be, not where you need to be. I think that's where they can get caught up in the thing of like, it's not about you as the coach or consultant or whatever. It's the client,
Exactly.
where they want to get to. Don't get yourself caught up in ego and all that sort of stuff, because you're making yourself the hero when it's really the client who
That's
needs
exactly
to be
right.
eating,
Yeah.
100%. And I think what's really interesting, and it's almost counter to current, depending on what you watch, of belief about getting into business. You said there was like, don't fall in love with it. Whereas kind of like where so many at the moment would be like, it's like follow your purpose, find your passion, follow your passion and stuff, And as you say, there needs to be maybe an element of detachment, because otherwise you could just keep doing something, again, as we said earlier, doing something expecting a different result that might just not work.
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think like I'm incredibly passionate about what I do,
sure.
but I also know that I have a family
Yeah,
to
yeah.
support. Right. Uh, one of the things that I was taught earlier in my career by one of my mentors was that a lot of times people say, "Well, money's not important to me." I'm saying, "Well, it's important to the banker, and it's important to the dry cleaner, it's important to the grocer, right?" So it's much easier to live with money than without. So it's not that it's about money. In fact, one of the remarkable things, 'cause I've had the pleasure and the good fortune of working with some incredibly high performers over the years. And what I find with high performers, it's never about the money. It, they don't do it for the money, but they wouldn't do it if there wasn't money involved.
Yes.
So but it's not about the money. It's about they're passionate about the service and the value they provide to their clients, right? Now, I was coaching this one young lady one time, and she was a salesperson for a client of mine, and the client was upset and frustrated because she had so much potential, but she just wasn't working very hard, but she was so talented. And she said, I said, well, what have you tried? She said, I've tried to show her how much more money she could earn if she just worked a little bit harder. And I was like, well, let me talk to her. So I talked to her, and I'm like, hey, so like, what's going on? She's like, my money's just not that important to me. I'm earning enough. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, and I knew the industry pretty well. She was working. And I said, so what happens when people don't buy from you? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, like if you don't follow up or anything, like where do they go? And she goes, well, they go to the big box stores. I'm like, oh, okay. What happens then? And she said, well, usually they get sold something that's not the right product. And because, that person might have been working in like some other department the day before, and now they're working in flooring and they don't really understand flooring. Oh, so you fail. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, they went and got product that probably isn't going to be the right product. I said, how do you know it's the wrong product? She said, because about 5 years later, they're back in here saying, I bought this product at, the big box, and it didn't really do what we thought it was going to do. And I'm like, she's like, I hadn't thought about it that way. I said, so what motivates you is serving people, right? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, what if you serve more people? And she said, I think I'd like that. I said, well, you'd make more money. She said, I don't need more money. I said, well, then just give it away. And she said, well, I might not do that. Right. So she didn't mind the money.
Yes.
That's what I find with high performers. They're not doing it for the money. Now, some people are. There's about 15% of the population. It's just
Yeah.
about the money, right?
Yeah.
But for most people, it's not just about the money.
No.
They have to be doing something that feeds their soul, right? But the problem is sometimes we get our passion, but we
Yes.
miss that you also have to connect. If you're not making much money, you're not providing much value into the marketplace.
Yes.
So if you're not providing much value, well, that's sort of criminal. You should
Yeah.
be providing value. And if you're
Yes.
providing value, you should be able to charge for that.
Absolutely. No, it's really, really valid point. And it's one of those things again where people can get, depending on what you're watching and depending on what you're looking at, that thing of like, as you say, the money isn't important. It's just about, being completely, that sort of almost hippie sort of perspective of life, and I can be free and everything. It reminded me that when you were talking about that, it's like a few years ago. So obviously I'm in Ireland, and when you get, still, I think it's still the case, if you get married in a Catholic church in Ireland, you have to go to a marriage course, a pre-marriage course for the priest and stuff like that. So this is what we got. My wife and I got married more than 10 years ago now, 12, 13 years ago. And we went to this hotel and we went through the course. And then there's a lovely lady doing the presentation. And there's a few things I remember from it. And one of the things she was talking about, and we were going through this presentation, she said, oh, she's very sort of glib. She says, oh, all you need is love. And she went, no, you don't. You need money. And it was that sort of like, she's like, this is when like, so this is something like, you don't think you can just get through this without this. Like, be realistic. And it's like, it's that thing of like, yes, you want to have fulfillment in your life. Yes, you want to have either passion or enjoy it. But it doesn't mean you can't go without, as you say, the value that you're worth. And if you have that, I think people's relationship with money is a really interesting
Yes.
thing to get in, because some people feel guilty for it. Some people think they can get, it's too much, they have all these sort of qualms about it, or that lady there going, oh, you have enough. But it's like, it's not wrong to think of yourself when you go into anything that I want a certain standard of life, certain standard of, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a very strategic thing, especially if you're going into business.
Yeah. You if you're going to there are easier ways to make a marginal living than working for yourself. If you're going to work for yourself, you should do well financially, whatever that means to you. And it's not my job to tell people how to set their goals. It's just, but like sometimes I'll talk to people and they're like, well, all I need is like X. And I'm like, so I wouldn't go after all you need.
Yes.
There's no passion in going after what the minimum is. Like, go after something more than that, right? And I always say, if you don't need the money, give it away. I mean, there's lots of charities and lots of people that you could give it away to, and I think we should support that. I think that should be part of ours. One of our core values here at the company is humility, and that
I love that.
that true greatness at its core has a humble spirit. So like people sometimes say, look at what we've done, and they're like, how'd you learn all that stuff? I'm like, well, I worked with a ton of really talented people. Like, nobody does all this by themselves. Nobody learns everything by themselves. If you look at our material, it's leadership principles. I didn't write it. It's this. People are the same now as they were 2,000 years ago. I mean, technology has shifted, the environment has changed, but people are basically the same. We have much more comfortable lives today than we had.
Yeah.
And that allows us to get into all sorts of trouble quite often. That nobody had time to get into years ago. They were too busy just scratching out a living. Yes. Whereas now we can sort of do okay without working very hard at all.
Yeah. No, I think it's bringing that. When I was talking earlier about the sort of the people who think that everything's so complicated, and there's also an element of that in relation to this side of it, as well as so much of it, I find, and myself included in this, the next step is so much more simple if you're willing to look at it. Whereas, and it's the thing that you're putting off is generally the thing that you need to do next. And do you know what I mean? And it's like, you'll do anything and everything to sort of, to avoid confronting whatever that is, whether it's just making the phone call, sending the email, drafting the copy, making you, whatever that thing is, signing up for whatever, like, it's like, or it could be even something even more simple than that, and it's like that sort of, I think that self leadership piece is kind of, you gotta make those moves, because, and do you find then, because I think what stops people, and it stops me a lot of the times, it is that thing of, but what if it goes wrong? What will they say? All of those human things that we have that stop us from trying to take those next steps.
Yeah. We have a lot of negative self-talk that we get into, without question, right? And basically our belief systems create our actions, and our actions create our results, right? So one of the things that I encountered when I first started this business was I had encountered a lot of financial success in Toronto, but I had no life. I had a great lifestyle, but no life, which is what prompted me to change. And it was all my fault. I thought it was the job, right? I thought, well, I'll get a different job and I'll work for myself. And then but the problem is, when you quit your job to find a new job, you take the biggest challenge with you, because it's you, right? And so it was interesting because one of my mentors at the time, my happiness went up immeasurably. I came to the U.S. I met my wife. She did not know she was my wife at the time, but I did. But it took her a little time. We started after we got married. We started a family, and things were going amazingly well. But my income took a big hit, right? Now, part of that was because I'd started a new job, but that wasn't all of it. Because what my mentor pointed out to me, he said, when you were in Toronto, were you happy? I'm like, well, I mean, I was happy, but I really wasn't satisfied with my life. And he's like, but you were doing well financially, weren't you? And I said, yes, I was. And he said, so you know what I think happened? You tied together two things in your mind. You tied together financial well-being with unhappiness or lack of
Mm,
satisfaction. He said, so now you're really, really happy and satisfied with how your life is, so you're thinking you can't possibly be as well off financially. And you know what? He was right.
mm,
I was self-sabotaging myself at that time. And it's interesting, when you change your beliefs, think your results will change very, very, very quickly,
yeah.
because you'll start doing things differently.
Yes.
Your results don't change because your beliefs change. Your results change because your actions change, but your actions change because your belief system shifts.
Yeah.
And so when I started to sort of look at it and go, well, why can't I do well financially
Yes.
and have the life I truly want, which is what I was trying to create for my clients, right? So
Yes.
so not only did it benefit me, it benefits every leader I work with, because now I can hear their self-sabotaging belief system
Yeah.
when I'm talking to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I mean it's a really, but doesn't it show, even when you're, one of the themes you said throughout this, and you work in the space of having, working with leaders, coaching people, but obviously one of the trends that you've had mentors, you've had people that you work with
Yes.
alongside that, because doesn't it just show the benefit of that having someone there that can hold that up to yourself, and so, because even when you're in the thick of it, doing it for other people, sometimes we can miss it on ourselves as well. So that's obviously been a huge thing for you, having those mentors throughout your career.
Yeah, I've had a coach every year for 30 years now. Not the same ones all the time, right?
Yeah,
But
sure.
I have a coach. People sometimes say, "What do you need a coach for? You're a coach." I'm like, like, you know, how could I be, congruent
Mm,
telling other people that coaching is valuable if I don't invest in myself, first of all, but second of all, a coach is what we call a blind spot identifier. It's
mm,
hard to identify our own blind spots.
yeah.
When you're paying someone to help you, um, you're more likely to accept their feedback than your spouse. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but let me tell you, if you go home today and ask your spouse, "What's one or two things I could do to improve the quality of our relationship?" They know, right? They may not want to tell you, right, because they're afraid of how you might receive it.
Yes,
But everybody
absolutely.
knows. You know,
Yeah.
In fact, I think most people know what they need to do. They don't know why
Yes.
they're not doing it, or they know
Yeah.
what they need to stop doing, and they don't know why they're not stopping, right? Because we are creatures of habit. So having a coach creates an accountability mechanism that's super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like what I said a few moments ago. It's that thing of like, we're most likely to avoid the thing that's going to challenge us most. It's because I think there's also one of the things I try and put out to people as well is, any of this work that anyone is doing on themselves through any sort of guise is not easy. Just, because so the position you've been in for your, career for 30 years, and the business you got up and all these things you've worked on yourself, that's not been easy. This stuff is hard, and I think there's a perception that maybe comes. Oh no, you say, why does Andrew need a coach? Well, because he's got it. He's got it made. It's kind of like, no. It's because of what the thing you said earlier is like, no, because doing the same things, working on those same things, and having the willingness to do the hard things on a consistent basis. So don't think that someone, when you're looking up at someone, don't think that they've just got it made. They've had to do that work, and they found it difficult as well.
Yeah. My favorite thing when people come up to me and say, "I want to do what you do," I'm like, "I bet you do, but do you want to do what I did?"
Yes, yes, yes. That's a
Because
great one.
I love what I do, but I mean, there was a time where I got up every day and I did 6 to 7 presentations a day to various sales organizations. I drove all around metropolitan Atlanta. presentation after presentation after presentation. I learned more in that year about how to make presentations than I would have in a 20 years of
Yeah.
doing it ad hoc. But
Yes.
I did the same thing. And by the way, it was the same presentation over and over. And my timing got better and the way I delivered material got better. So, people sometimes say, if you want to get into the coaching space, or the training space, I always go find a training company that has like a trainer in the box program and go work for them for like a year and do the same presentation over and over and over. And you're going to learn how to work with groups. You're going to learn how to ask good questions, right? Learn on somebody else's dime. Don't try to do it
Mm,
all. Like I learned on my own dime. It's,
yes.
which is, why my learning curve was sort of flat at first because there
Yeah.
was nobody helping me understand what I needed to do differently.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You mentioned there a second ago, in what was it when you were saying part of your programs now, you say not that you've come up with them, but you had the leadership principles as part of it. Could you give me a few of what along with everyone that you've worked with, but what are your sort of, for the company you work with, your sort of leadership principles that you work?
Yeah, so one of my favorite expressions and sayings, this was actually given to me by a mentor of mine, is that the amount of progress you make in your life will be directly proportional to the amount of honesty you can accept about yourself. He went on to say he did not think I was into honesty, by the way. Thank you. But
Thanks for that backhanded compliment.
yeah, yeah. But this goes back to the whole emotional intelligence model.
Yeah,
Must first be self-aware, right? And
yeah,
self-awareness is very, very difficult because we have all these defense mechanisms. Like
yeah,
when someone gives me feedback I don't like, I'm like, they don't really understand. They don't get me. They don't understand what I'm dealing with. So just how do you find people who will speak to you with love the things that you need to hear? Now, if you don't have those type of people in your life, like I'll sometimes talk to a leader and I'm like, well, who on your team, who in your peer group, gives you difficult feedback? And they're like, I ask people for feedback all the time, but they ask people who validate their current state because
yeah,
they're like them. Like,
yes,
so, so, that's one. The other one would be that the challenges and frustrations you experience in your life are the raw material for what you need to learn. So, it's the first question we ask leaders, like, what's frustrating you?
mm,
And their answer to that question tells me what they need to learn.
yes,
I can't find
yeah,
good people. Young people today don't want to work.
yeah, yeah,
People won't be accountable for it's all external, right? It's like the
yeah,
problem is out there, and the problem is rarely, the problem is out there, don't get me wrong, but the solution is in here. The
yes,
solution is how I need to interact with people. And by the way, if you could do everything right and they could still not be motivated or want to accept
yeah,
responsibility or whatever, that's true, but that's not an excuse for inaction. Because when I make the source of my problems outside of myself, then I am a victim. And I
mm,
don't believe that we should go through life as victims. There are plenty of victims in the world, but in this particular case that we're talking about, this is
yeah,
not an area you want to play the victim.
yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. Um, Fantastic, Andrew. So much insight there. You've thrown a few in already, but I'm going to challenge you for another one. One of the I get to love to ask every guest on is there any quotes or phrases that are important to you? So any other ones that you could share with us?
Yeah, my favorite, and I say this to clients all the time, never allow what's comfortable to stop you from accomplishing what is possible. Because what we do is we get all mired up in our comfort zone, and when you're comfortable, you're not growing. And when you're not
Yes.
growing, you're actually putting what's possible on the back burner. So, um, you know, it's easy to press other people to get outside their comfort zone. It's harder for us to press ourselves.
Yeah, but it's a because that one is the whole thing of comfort zone is again said quite a lot, but it's I love it when you word it the way you've that's worded there in the sense of what's possible. And I think that's the thing of like getting people to think of it's not absolute. It's possible. It's opportunity. It's there, but it's like, but it because I think one of the things that people get fixated on and not going after themselves is they get so and this was me. This is coming from experience. Like you get so fixated on the outcome that, it's great to have goals. I'm not discounting it, but if you literally hang your hat on, if I don't see that, then that'll just mess you up entirely. Have a vision, have a thing to go towards, have metrics there in place, but you can't become completely slave to it, because it'll kill you before you get there. So it's like, think of, and then people come that more comfortable thing, because it's like, oh, it becomes too big or too whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Possible is such a better word, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, it is. And when you're part of our challenge is we should have this ideal future that's way out there. That's okay. You have a dream, have an aspiration, but what's something that you believe is possible that's outside your comfort zone that will move you in the direction of your dream?
Yeah.
That's a good goal.
Yeah, 100%. You've also mentioned a few throughout this chat as well, the various mentors you've had, but who would you say have been your biggest influences, Andrew?
Well, Bob Proctor was massive for me, because he just sort of rocked my world in terms of changing the way I thought. Dan Sullivan runs a program out of Chicago called the Strategic Coach. He's been instrumental in shaping my thinking as well. So those would be two of the bigger influences in my life. But, the interesting thing today is that you can read a book, and somebody who wrote a book that you've never met can have a remarkable influence in your life. And there's never been a time when there's, more information available in easily digestible formats like podcasts, like this one, or Audible books, audio books. I have a massive library behind me, and I know it's my job to study leadership, but I love reading good books about leadership, and I love books that make the complex simple rather than the simple complex.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. I think, and I think it's what I think is really valuable for what you said there is that we can have those almost iconic people that will obviously can have a real big influence on us. But I think sometimes we can look in the other places and allow it to influence us, as opposed to necessarily always looking for it. I think it's that part, if we have that sort of open mind to things, we can absorb it versus then just always thinking, influence me. We can just be open to it, and something can have an impact on you.
Absolutely. Without question.
Absolutely. 100%. Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I've got one more question before I let you go, though, which is, what's important for your future?
Right now, what we're trying to do, and we're putting all our effort into, is creating scalable tools that allow coaches to work with their clients in a more effective way. And that's what we're spending a lot of time on right now. Books, programs, scalable resources, online that people can use, because quite often what happened, and this happened to me early on, I was trying to create everything myself. And I figured out now, like there's one of our programs, I don't use my own material for it, because even though we had all the jigsaw pieces, somebody had already put the puzzle together. So sometimes it's just easier just to use somebody else's stuff in that particular area. So that's what we're spending most of our time on now, is trying to figure out a way to take all that we've created and all that we've learned over the last 30 years and put it into a packageable asset that the coaches can interact around.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. I say, Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. I've definitely taken stuff from this chat myself personally, and I'm sure people will take it for themselves. I obviously want to keep supporting what you're doing, and hopefully people will get something from this. But we'll put where people can find you online in the show notes. But if you want to give a shout out where people can find you online.
Yeah, our website is transformingresults.com. transformingresults.com, because that's what we're all about. We're about transforming results. Now, you 100%. Don't get there directly. You get through yourself, but ultimately we want to become a better version of ourselves on a daily basis.
100%. And we'll make sure that link is in the show notes so you can check out Andrew's website and what they do. Andrew, once again, thank you so much for chatting to me.
It was a pleasure, James. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if it resonated, share it with someone who might need it too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or ask a question, and let's keep the conversation going. I'm James Dean, and I'll be back soon with another real conversation to help you reconnect with what truly matters. Until then, take care and stay curious.